Welcome to the Hunting Beast Podcast, your source for hunting tactics, news, and stories. And now your host, Mario Traficante.
All right, welcome. This week we're going to continue on with our Q&A series with Dan and myself. We have 22 questions left in the initial list, and I have my phone with me here too, so we're going to pop on the Beast. There were a few more additional questions that were on the list that we'd like to cover. So, Dan, 4th of July weekend, how's it going?
It's going. The fireworks were keeping me up last night.
Yeah, there were a few neighbors that were blasting off some stuff here too.
It's funny, my neighbor was blowing up his yard, and it's the same neighbor who came over all concerned when they moved in because I was shooting guns in my yard.
Oh, yeah, that's when I was over there. Sure.
Yeah. Oh, you were there? Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
Well, fireworks, okay, they can blow off big bombs right over my house. It'll ignite my house. But shooting a gun into a target with a good background, well, she's got kids. That's scary and dangerous.
Yeah. Well.
Okay, hopefully she doesn't watch this.
It's all right. It's all good. Neighborly fun. So, we'll get started. So we're on question number 22. And this one revolves around deer drives. And there was a couple, there was one user on the site that was really interested in maybe having a podcast just on deer drives. But we'll go right into this question. Dan, deer drives. How to set up and why? When? If you are looking for another topic about a podcast, you might think about doing one on deer drives. So some guys just drive timber and set standards at the property line. This topic may appeal to many gun hunters that have no clue about the buck bedding tactics that you are talking about. And he goes on to ask, what is your strategy? You guys, have you guys thought this out at all? Other hunters would respond by saying, this is how we've done it for years. Some years we get lucky, most of the time we go home empty. Some things that may be obvious to someone experienced like Dan may be completely enlightening to others. So you may want to draw it out, show how you approach certain areas, where to position standers and pushers. Exactly. So, yeah, I think, obviously you have a specific plan how you set up your drives, so this is probably a pretty good
Yeah, you've
scenario.
come on my drives with me.
Yeah.
I guess probably a lot of people don't hear a lot about the drives because we don't talk about that a lot. We usually talk about the bull hunting strategies. But I've become really good at driving deer. First off, and what I got to say is that I could do much better, at least for a year or two, driving deer by driving the private land that we have access to, but I won't do it. Because when you drive private land, you kill deer. If you do it correctly, you kill deer. And if you got young guys along, they're going to kill bucks you don't want shot, and you don't want to tell them they can't.
Right.
Deer are going to get shot a mistake because it's fast-paced. And you teach those deer that that's a bad place to be. You want them to believe that they're perfectly safe in those bedrooms. So you leave them alone. So on private land, I don't do drives. And I would recommend anybody watching this who has private land, unless they got 8 million acres, they don't do it on their private land. I do drive private land. But I drive private land where the landowner does drives, and I don't have a choice, so I can either join in or not do it.
Right.
So I don't voice my opinion. I just go out there and do it. And I've been on a lot of drives. I've had a lot of people invite me on drives, and I see a lot of mistakes. And, every now and then you learn something. For me, my drives are real well planned out. I study aerials. I think about the wind. I think about the positioners. And we see trends. And I drive known buck bedding areas. I try not to. I do it occasionally, but I try not to do huge drives where you drive huge parcels. You try to break them down and do small drives. Big bucks are notorious for finding a way around you if you make it too big. You gotta lock it down tight. And we do way better, even if we know an area, a large area, we know there's a giant in there that you want to get. And that's usually when I do those big drives. even if you know he's in there, it takes up half your day to get on this one buck, and he usually finds a way out. Those little tiny drives, or a small patch off to the side, those overlooked spots again, are where we kill the big stuff. And it's funny, because it's like they learn. You do that the first year you do it, and you say, hey, I gotta drive this spot. I was bow hunting there, there's a good sign there. You drive it, and you kill some big buck. Try killing one there again. It's that first time you drive it that's usually hot. So moving it around, changing it up is a good thing. We do real well on small spots by the road and stuff that are overlooked. Everybody walks past. I mean, we talk about that all the time, and you've seen it firsthand. I can't give too much information, or everybody that's watching from my area will know exactly where I'm hunting.
Right.
But I can tell you this. It's so obvious it would make most people puke where we're shooting that stuff. I mean, right alongside parking lots, right, around people's backyards. There's this misconception that all those deer are way out in that wilderness, and they're not. Big bucks are creatures of living right around people, living in places where they don't get molested. And those big areas get molested. People go back there and they're everywhere. Where they're not is on the fringes. On the fringes, there's spots people miss, and that's what we try to drive. The trouble with that is you're wearing blaze orange, you're walking through this stuff, and people are seeing you. I remember a couple years back, we shot a giant buck that I was playing tag with bow hunting right alongside of a road. And when we shot it, right away somebody posts on the beast that they saw us driving there, and is that where we killed the big buck, and names the roads. It's like, what?
Yeah.
I was like, no, that's not where it was.
Now everyone's going to be searching that post.
Yeah, well, they can, because now everybody hunts there.
Yeah.
Those places change, like I said, or I wouldn't have mentioned it.
Right.
But the point is having a plan is a good thing, and going in, and organizing this. And one thing about drives is you got to have one leader. I'm the leader on a drive, and the reason for that is not because I'm big-headed and think I got to run things. It's because everybody's going to have a different opinion on how you do things. And if you sit around and listen to everybody's opinion before you go do something, it's going to take you 20 minutes to get set up for a drive, or an hour, because everybody's going to want to do it a different way. So somebody's got to be the boss. Somebody's got to be, nope, this is what we're doing. And if somebody's got an opinion, I'm open to listening to it, but they got my ear for so many seconds, and then I'm,
Right.
if they ain't got a good point, I'm moving on, because time is of the essence. You've seen it. We've got so many places to cover where we think big bucks are, and we have so much time. Now, I do my drives on public land, mostly. And the reason for that has been stated earlier. But I have endless amounts of public land. So I try to hit the ones first that I think people are going to get into and ruin on me.
Right.
And then I move on to stuff that I don't think anybody's going to get into.
So I'm just trying to, for the people that are watching, you're going to want a leader of your drive, and some other things that we'll touch on here. So Dan mentioned having a single person that's a leader. He also said look at aerial maps.
Yeah, when you're looking at those aerials too, don't set yourself up for failure. Look for drives that you can do that you can accomplish. Some people will just want to drive a spot because they know it's probably got a big buck there. But if you can't kill the thing, don't waste your time. You can kill them with a bow later, or sitting in a stand with the gun. Pick drives where you can kill deer. That main drive that I like to do, where I killed the 12-pointer this year. I've killed, I think it's almost a dozen bucks out of that drive now so far.
Right.
And it's a huge kind of area to drive, but it narrows down through funnels that they can only leave in certain ways.
Right.
And makes it easy to kill the deer when they evacuate. I lost my point.
Yeah, no, you're right. So, leader, aerial maps, small bedding areas, and you mentioned this multiple times, but it's like the pinch point or
Yeah.
the narrow.
Making sure you can kill the deer there.
Yeah.
if you got a drive where every time you do it, deer get out of it. There's no way you can kill them. They're, the minute you close the car door, they're jumping up and running. Don't even bother. I mean, let them have that spot. You can go in there and kill them with a bow when you ain't got a bunch of clumsy people with you.
Right. Because what I've noticed on a lot of those drives is being very particular about how you set up your line and how that line walks the property. Because those bucks notoriously try to backdoor you.
Mm-hmm.
So I think, and Dan alluded to this, the way that you have your line set up and staying in order, and you can really only achieve that on those smaller spots. If you have this huge vast area, it's too hard to cover. I mean, that buck that you shot this year, it tried to backdoor the group. And actually,
it didn't even come out till you guys were done.
Right. It did to some extent backdoor us, but where Dan was set up on his point stand, he could see over the whole area, and it came right to him. So, that is a big point. Have the area small enough so you can cover it with the people that you have.
Right.
And think about, it's kind of no different than when you're doing...
Did I call you?
Yeah.
I'm pocket dialing Mario, live on the show. Here, we'll just hang up on Mario. Okay, go ahead.
Yeah, to have the area small enough to where the people that you have with you can cover it adequately. And what I think Dan is meaning by that is that your line that you're walking with, that deer can't backdoor or get through that line without someone seeing it.
Right.
And
we often too, if we cannot go through an area without a deer having the possibility of slipping through, we try to keep guys where they can see each other, but we also try to keep the drives down to a small number of people so that the core group has opportunities to kill deer. But we do like to put a guy behind those drivers and catch him on that back door.
And this is a big thing too, that you trust. Dan mentioned this before, but to be successful with these things in these smaller areas, you got to trust the group that you're with, and they've got to understand the plan. If someone is designated the leader and has put out the plan, just follow it to the script and work through it. And we typically rotate. Guys will walk, guys will go on post, then guys will walk and guys will go on post, and everyone gets their time up.
And again, you have a leader who chooses who does what, so there's no arguing.
Right.
You either follow the leader or you don't need to come along.
Right. And yeah, it's typical team stuff.
Right.
Make sure that the team could get along and everyone's satisfied with what they're doing.
Right.
But
if you get one guy in the group who's arguing, who's not happy, it ruins everything. It ruins everybody's attitude. Everything. You can't have that. You have to tell the person, if you can't be nice, you can't be happy, go home. That's all there is to it.
And the other thing I noticed too is, on these public spots, getting into those bedding areas, Dan and his group that did this before I started, being involved with helping them, is they play human behavior a lot, because in these public areas during opening weekend and the following weekend, hunters patterns themselves. They'll go out in the morning, they'll hunt till 9 o'clock or 10 o'clock. There's this huge rush into the woods, and then everyone seemingly gets out of the woods and goes back home, gets something to eat, or goes to the bar and has fun with their friends. And that makes a shift in the deer movement. The deer will maybe get out of those tertiary bedding areas and they push back, way back into those primary bedding spots, or those real protected thick spots where no human traffic goes.
Certainly some of the spots are better after there's been pressure for a few days.
Right.
And waiting and having the timing on when you hit it is kind of crucial.
Yeah. So that's another thing to think about, is how much other external pressure are on these areas. Do you have neighboring people that are pushing the deer into this area? How thick is it? What timing of it is during the week? And we've all had this happen. I mean, I can recall doing some drives on some public back where I grew up with friends, and it was your typical scenario. We were getting together as friends, so there was a lot of talking and camaraderie going on, but then when it came down to the business of it, I can remember, we had our drive line going through, and a couple of us are talking and kind of not paying attention, and snow started to fall. Well, all of a sudden we look, and here's this nice buck jetting out of the wood line where we should have been on point seeing. We both watched this buck run across the field and get in before we could get our guns up, and part of it was we weren't focused on what we were there to do. We were kind of talking, and we weren't focusing on the area that buck was going to come out of, which, so be attentive.
Too, that does happen. There's a lot of times somebody in the drive doesn't believe in what you're saying, but when you see that happen once and it happens, you have a discussion about it, and it don't happen again.
Yeah. Because
if it happens again, you're a fool. The next time, that's guarded. Because they tend to break out of those spots the same way each time. Wind is one of the most crucial things in deer drives, wind direction. And the biggest thing is that you don't let that wind hit those deer until everybody's ready. And whether or not we put the drivers or the standers in first is dependent on the wind. So if the wind is blowing towards the drivers, they don't, the standers don't go in and blow those deer out of there before the drivers are set up, and vice versa. So a lot of times bucks will get up and run out the minute they smell a person in there. You'll have shooting immediately.
Right.
And a lot of times they won't move at all until you step on them or you go past them, and they get up and try sneaking out after you go through them. Every deer is different, but the truth of the matter is you have to treat them in the right manner. If you just go out there talking loud and surround the area, and you've seen this.
Yeah.
When we set up for these drives, where do we do the talking? Back at the truck. This is what we're doing. We get there. You guys are going over there. You're going over here.
Right.
You guys line up. Well, you don't want those deer to know what's going on. You don't want them to be planning like you planned.
Right.
You don't want them thinking, uh-oh, something's going on here. You want all of a sudden there's somebody on top of them. Uh-oh, what's going on here?
Right.
And now they got to escape or they got to get out of there. That's what you want.
Yeah, and I think, to kind of draw a little map of the scenario, so you're at the truck, we're doing all of our planning and talking down here. By the time, let's say, we get to the front of an area where we're going to start this drive, now you might have some natural impediment here, whether it's water or open timber,
Or even sometimes houses.
yeah, or this might be houses. So that's creating kind of your pinch point, and then over here, is another transition. But let's say that your bedding is primarily scattered all throughout this area, okay? And there might be some particular concentrated spots in here that you want to hit. What I've noticed with typically the way that Dan sets up on these is that this is no surprise, but before any of these people enter into this bedding area, like Dan had mentioned, the point guys get set up. So you might have a point here, you might have a point guy here. For sure, you'll have a point guy out here covering the end of it. They get all set up, we all get in sync, and then our line, spreads out. So these guys in the line obviously organize themselves as tight as they can to that pinch point, and they start communicating and moving forward. Now,
Might add, without yelling, without beating pans, no screaming, deer, move, clapping your hands. They're just going slow through the brush.
we're sneaking into these spots, right? Because we don't want to start bumping deer, until we're in that.
Nor do you want him to plant. If the deer's over here and he doesn't smell you, and you're yelling over there, he knows something's coming. He knows something's going on.
Right.
He knows you're where you're not supposed to be. You're giving him time to think about getting out of there, or to think about hunkering down and laying down and not moving and letting you walk past. You'll want to catch them by surprise.
And that's why Dan mentioned if you have that wind, let's say the wind is blowing in this direction. Well, you want to make sure these guys are in place before we wrap around and start sneaking in here, because we're going to push deer with a wind before we even get to it, So if you've got a crosswind or something going on like this, or the wind is actually, almost the best scenario for this is if you've got a crosswind coming like this, it'll protect this guy's scent, these two guys' scent, and it'll protect the driver's scent. So a wind, coming from this direction would be good. But the other key thing is your guy that's covering the backside. So we always set up a guy that covers the backside there.
One thing critical with our drives too is a lot of what we're driving is dense swamp. And the reason we're the only ones driving that stuff is because nobody else can kill deer doing it, because most people who drive don't take tree stands. We actually take tree stands and sticks on our backs and carry ladders out there, and we're elevated. And that's how we're killing them things. You couldn't even shoot a deer in this stuff, in cattails and dogwood and stuff, because you wouldn't know where anybody is if you weren't elevated. Because we got to have a background where that bullet's going down into the mud, or you'd be shooting your own guys. You can't do it. That's why nobody else is doing this, is because they're not willing to carry all that equipment out there and set up, and to wait for those guys to set up. And that's one of the biggest downfalls we have with this, is waiting for guys to set up tree stands and stuff before we can start anything.
Right.
But it's a necessary evil.
Yeah.
And that's why we kill a lot of these deer.
Yeah. So, this is kind of would be your typical scenario where you've got this bedding in a tighter, smaller area. You've got your line of your walkers that are set up on the backside of that bedding, wind factoring, and then you have point people. Obviously, one guy at the end that covers the final pinch point, and then there might be a couple people along the way that are covering other exit spots that can see into that bedding area from a distance.
And I'll give you another tip. If you got guys that don't know what they're doing, and you're kind of leading, no matter what, always take the downwind or upwind side, because those mature bucks, 90% of the time when they bust out of there, they're going straight into the wind or straight with the wind to their back. They either want to smell you following them, and that comes with thick cover, or they want to smell where they're going. And they're going to do one or the other, because they either want to know there's nobody in front of them, or they want to know there's nobody behind them.
Yeah.
You don't see that as much with the little stuff. It scatters.
Yeah.
But even that will kind of follow the rules. But trust me and watch your results. You're going to start noticing that big stuff busts upwind or downwind.
Yeah. Yeah, and how, to give an example of how this might really play out, if you push this area into this, once your walking line, the distance between us and this stand right here was probably, we were in a walking line like this. And some of this is off, but the buck we pushed this year, again, it's really thick in here. That thing rotated this backside and came through here. Mm-hmm. And that's where Dan was able to shoot it.
And when first look at this would not be the stand most people would pick. Most people would want to be here.
Yeah.
And that's typically where Dave always wants to sit.
Right.
It's kind of funny, because occasionally we'll have a young buck go through there. But every mature buck that we've shot in this drive, and I've shot 7 of them, and I'm the only one that's gotten a mature one, I'm always sitting here, and they're always doing this. They're always coming out in that manner. Or the occasion has been when the wind is blowing like this, they go towards him, but they don't want to go past him, so they hole up. And as they're sneaking, I shoot them.
Yeah.
But they always get that wind in favor. But this might look like something that, wow, that deer was smart, but we see a lot of them doing that on that particular drive. The exact same manner, the exact same way in and out. And the guy in the back door, he gets a lot of opportunities too, if the wind is right, if the wind's blowing one way or the other. A lot of times these guys will start and the deer will jump up right there and just barrel run right past them. This guy's always on a ladder because that's in open terrain, so you recognize your map. So you know how many other people are going to recognize it. It's so easy.
Well,
I'm just messing with you. But.
Yeah. And that's where that having options, the ladder acts as that tripod stand, and then you can have other climbing sticks and stands that you use. So, but there's a couple different spots that kind of map into this scenario where you have that pinched area that the people can cover. So yeah, study an area of the spot you want to go. Make sure it's small enough that you can cover it with the amount of people that you have. The smaller the better. Concentrated area. Have a leader, right? Make sure everyone is on the same page. No arguing in the team.
Make sure you cover downwind and upwind.
Yep. Cover downwind and upwind.
And make sure that you take the proper equipment along. That's a big one because most people are going to say, I ain't carrying a tree stand out there. Well, then don't come with me.
Yeah.
Either you're carrying a tree stand in the ladder occasionally or you're not coming because we need that equipment.
Right.
We need it out there. I mean, you might have an old guy can't carry it. Well, you got plenty of guys that are going to be pushing. One of them can be carrying something.
Right.
You need to have those guys elevated that they can shoot. And how many of those bucks that I shoot, you would never be able to see from ground level. Even a 12-pointer this year.
No.
I mean, it was an easy kill from a tree. From ground level, I might not even ever seen it.
Yeah. Yeah. And cover your backside always on the drive because they'll escape the backside.
One thing I want to add to this too is the way I got really good at doing deer drives is kind of a way that helped me with my bow hunting too. But when I started gun hunting, a lot of my biggest bucks I've ever killed, I killed by sneaking into their bedding areas and shooting them. And by doing that, I really learned how they bed and when they bed and how they use the wind and how they escape and stuff like that and how to get in on them. And that's another option. I mean, getting in there and just doing it yourself or with one or two people. You don't have to have a group. I mean, the older I get, the easier it is to work with a group than to try and do this stuff myself or to try to find the right kind of partner to team up on. But you can go in, and if you know those mature bucks, generally, go upwind and downwind, and there's no way he's going downwind because there's a lake or a house, or you can have your buddy on the downwind side, and you're sneaking in there trying to kill him in his bed on a crosswind, thinking about how he's looking from his bed and how the wind's going and how you can do it. And if you think noise is going to get you, it might, but you might be surprised. If you get close and you're making noise, a lot of times they just hunker down and they lay there until you can see them. A lot of times they can't hear you. You might sound like a freight train to yourself, but that noise ain't going through cattails or dogwood or whatever. From up in a tree it's loud. From ground level, sitting in a little nest with everything blocking those sound waves, it's a lot quieter than you think. You can get a lot closer to those deer than you think. And you can do this with one or two people, or you can make a group event out of it or a family event. My thoughts would be to keep towards the lower numbers of people, and as Mario alluded to earlier, keep it to people you trust. If you don't trust somebody, or you can't get along with somebody, even if they're a good friend of yours, if they're always questioning everything you say, they don't need to be along.
Yeah, you want the day to go smooth.
So there's a 10-hour answer to a 5-minute question.
Yes, that took us 15 minutes to get through one question. So that's all right. All right, on to the next one here. All right, so this one, rut tactics, beast hunting. I'd like to hear more about beast threads where Dan and another member mentioned hunting spots that are overlooked and others. So this is kind of similar. I'd like to hear some of these types of spots or anything rut related. So rut beast tactics.
Yeah.
That's what we're talking about here.
Yeah, that's a good topic, and one that comes up occasionally, and it gets a little complicated. But I can say this: it isn't too often you shoot a mature buck, especially on pressured or public land, in a funnel, or chasing does, or doing the typical rut stuff. I mean, it happens. And you see them enough that it keeps people doing it, but who do you know that hunts in that manner on pressured land that shoots big bucks on a regular basis? I don't know anybody.
Yeah.
And I can shoot big bucks on a regular basis during the rut by hunting them where they're at, near their bedding. But the bedding shifts around and changes. They bed a lot in relation to does. But it's no different than the rest of the season. They bed in relation to food. Right? Sometimes some of those good bedding areas will hold bucks year-round. Some of them, they will shift during rut. The best buck bedding areas that I have for rut are ones that are downwind of doe bedding areas. So if your primary wind goes a certain way, the buck bedding area is downwind of it. I have one area, you helped me get a buck out of there once, that I shot early season. Mm-hmm. But that area I've shot probably 10 bucks out of that one bedding area, because it's a really good bedding area. It's got like 50 beds in a little acre spot.
Right.
But it's just downwind of a doe bedding area. When I see does come out of there, they come out of this little point that's just upwind of that bedding area. And the bucks pay no attention to them most of the year. But when I go in there early season or late season and I see bucks, sometimes you see a big one, sometimes you see a small one. Okay. But rut is when I see the huge stuff there. Right. And that's where I shot the Rome Legend. That buck I knew was using that area, and I knew he was bedding across the street, and I knew he came over there looking for does during rut. And I just sat back the second year I hunted him and waited for all the sign to show up. When the sign showed up, I didn't hunt where the sign was. I went to where that bedding area was, walked right past a whole bunch of guys that were hunting over the sign, walked right to the tree. I guessed where that buck would be bedding, and I watched him rise out of the exact bed I thought he was going to be in, because he was bedded downwind of those does. And you've seen that too. It took us a while to figure out what was going on, but we hunted a doe bedding area where adjacent to it there was a lot of buck sign, and we knew something was going on there. And that buck sign blew up overnight, and I had gone through there because I was hunting the back end or whatever, and my hunt was over and Mario was just beginning. And I said, Mario, somebody needs to get out to that island. And you had that buck come in and got through without killing it. But what we did, and what I usually do, is I backtrack in winter. So me and Mario went out there after season. Okay, where was this buck? Where did he come from? And he got up and followed a doe through, right? Yep. That came out of the doe bedding. So we already assumed it was a rut bed. So we went back and found that bed, and it was in a perfect location where it watched every doe that would come out of that bedding area. And when the right one came out and came past us, he took follow, and that's why he almost got him. But now we know that that bed is there, and that's why that island gets ripped up every year at that time frame.
Right.
So now we know that. We can work with that. But finding rut beds is not as easy as finding the regular beds, because rut beds are used during the rut. So if it's just a rut bed and it's not a primary bedding area that just happens to be downwind of doe bedding, if it's used every year during rut, it's not going to have a lot of wear to it. Because how often is that buck looking for a doe?
Right.
It ain't the whole rut. Half the rut he's with a doe, right? Different bucks will move in and out of them, and the primary buck in the area is going to get to hold that bed if it's a good one. But by the time spring comes along and you're looking at bed.
That concludes today's podcast episode. Please go to thehuntingbeast.com to post any discussions, questions, or comments regarding today's podcast episode.